What's up, brand builders? Today's episode is a little different from the usual. Rather than strategy, I talk about the actual process of creating a logo design. Now, one of the first questions that our clients ask us is, what is the cost of a logo design? It is quite natural for our client to know the costs before anything else. This is a very difficult part of the process, both for the designer and for the client. On the one hand, the design firm would like to know the client's budget so that they can decide what they can do within that budget. On the other hand, the client would like to keep their budget a secret and would rather like to know what the designer or the firm would charge for the service. So the wonderful process of creating an identity starts off on the wrong foot with suspicion and lack of clarity. It is understandable that the client would not like to reveal what they can truly afford because they may think that revealing that fact may prompt the design firm to quote a similar figure or maybe slightly more, while they may have quoted something cheaper. From the design firm's perspective, they would like to know the budget so that they can decide the time and resources that they can allocate to the project and what elements can be developed and designed. A higher budget would mean that more time can be allocated to research and brainstorming, or perhaps a more senior creative director may lead the project. From all this confusion arises the question of the true cost of a logo design. In other words, an opportunity cost. A company's logo design or its brand identity is the biggest brand asset. It creates the first impression and reiterates the brand's message every time the target audience is exposed to it. It sets the stage for expectation and it determines how the market perceives the brand. So getting the best logo design within your budget should be the top priority. So let us start this video by clarifying what a best logo design means. Characteristics of a great logo design. There are lots of articles online about what makes a great logo. And usually you see these attributes. I do not want to delve too deeply on this topic, but want to set the stage for the rest of the video by listing the core elements of what makes a logo great. Original and unique. Before anything else, a logo design has to be original. This is where your money is well spent. Logo designs that are based on plagiarism or even heavy inspiration may be a liability to your business, attracting litigation down the line. Even if you're not sued for copyright infringement, what would your target audience think when they realize that they had seen your logo somewhere else? Distinct. A logo has to be distinct. It has to have design elements that create a distinction from amongst the thousands of logos one is exposed to every day. Distinction can come in the form of color, typography, clever use of negative space, ornamentation, simplicity, and so on. A bland-looking logo would do you no good. Versatile. Gone are the days of static, monolithic logos. Consumers are accessing brands on a whole range of different media and services. Your logo design has to look great at all sizes, on all devices, and in all formats. Developing a logo design that can morph to match different uses and touch points is crucial. This would be where the bulk of your investment goes. Creating versatile logo designs is an art form that goes beyond just being able to push lines and circles around in a design software. This is where true creativity and deep thinking comes in. Targeted. A logo has to speak to its audience. It has to be appropriate for that market segment. It has to connect with the worldview of your target consumers. Consider, for example, an informal, childlike, hand-drawn icon to represent an investment company. Would that work well? How about the same logo used for a daycare center or a charity? Yes, perhaps more appropriate. The same goes for choice of fonts, colors, and even layouts. It is important to remember here that the logo should connect with the target audience and not necessarily with the business owner. Memorable. A logo design has to be memorable. Your audience should be able to recall your logo from memory. Of course, the burden of this does not rely solely with the design, but rather with how well you market your brand. People mention the McDonald's logo when they talk about memorability and how most people can draw the golden arches from memory. That is not just because of how great the McDonald's logo is, but rather because of the ubiquitous nature of the exposure to this Uber brand everywhere. McDonald's spent millions, billions on making sure people remember their logo. Timeless. Trends are good, but only for a certain time. As soon as that trend or fad fades away, your logo would start to look dated and would begin to harm your brand perception. A great logo should be timeless. It should be based in solid design principles and not on the hottest trend of the day. Do you remember the 3D logo fad in the 80s or the swooshes of the 90s? Of course, I'm not saying that you should never follow trends, but you should do so judiciously. So, how are great logos created? Now that we've looked at the basics of what makes a great logo, let us start placing value on each of the tasks that a designer would undertake. This would allow us to understand the true cost of a logo design. There are different kinds of designers in this world. I'm going to loosely categorize them. On the one extreme, you have the design professionals who have some form of formal technical education and have spent their careers practicing the profession of design. They are much like other professionals such as accountants, lawyers, or doctors. They have industry standard practices and usually abide by a code of ethics. They're accountable to their profession. On the other extreme are fly-by-night designers who can open a design software and push around some shapes. These designers are usually not educated in design and usually depend heavily on plagiarism for ideas. In between these two extremes are a whole variety of designers, both big and small, with varying degrees of skill, commitment, passion, professionalism, and creativity. Step 1, discovery. Technically speaking, any one of these designers can create a logo. A circle with some text below it can be a logo. It is quite easy to draw a circle in Adobe Illustrator or Photoshop and type the word Target below it. So how difficult would it be to come up with an iconic logo like Target? Here is an excerpt taken from the Target website explaining how their logo came about. In the months before the first Target store opened its doors, former Dayton's director of publicity, Stuart K. Widnes, is tasked to name and define the new retail store. Widnes and his staff debate more than 200 possible names. In a burst of red and white inspiration, they came up with Target and immediately envisioned a classic bullseye logo. The reasoning behind the choice was, as a marksman goal is to hit the center bullseye, the new store would do much the same in terms of retail goods, services, commitment to the community, price, value, and overall experience. As you can see, the power of the design is not the design itself. After all, the icon is just a bullseye. Nothing special about that. However, the power comes from the meaning attached to the icon with how the company was positioning its new stores. And this is where the soul of a logo design comes from. And this is what separates good designers from bad designers. Understanding the message and finding a connection to a visual reference is the job of the designer. A design professional would look at this as a diagnosis stage. Just as a doctor would diagnose what is wrong with a patient, Before prescribing a remedy, so too would a designer get to the core of what the business is trying to do before jumping to a design solution. Typically, the discovery stage can take anywhere from 5 to 7 hours. Bad designers and fly-by-night designers never go through this process. They do not have the skills, the knowledge, or the time to diagnose a problem. And to be honest, they really do not have to, since the clients they service are out to get the cheapest graphics that they would work as their logo, are not interested in the attributes of a great logo, as we just discussed. If a designer charges $100 or even $300 for a logo design, it would be unreasonable for one to expect that the designer would spend time understanding the business and its challenges. Step 2, research. Once the diagnosis has been made and the designer or the design team understands the challenges faced by the business, it is time to research into possible design solutions. At this stage, it is still not about possible designs, but rather design solutions. A design solution proffers a theme, an idea, or ideas, or a series of elements that address the business message challenge. This includes research on the client industry segment, the competition, and the client business itself. The results of a well-conducted research would include mood boards, which are later used in the brainstorming and sketching phases. Mood boards include visuals, photos, images, etc. that relate to a brand, the market, or the target audience. It is the glimpse into the worldview of the target market. Most small business owners and startups tend to not appreciate the importance of research and perhaps believe that a designer should get about the task of designing and not waste time on research. This could be a critical mistake. Research into a market segment uncovers information and insight that would be instrumental in developing a brand identity that may ultimately set your business apart. Just jumping into a design with this step would be creating problems. Typically, this stage can take anywhere from 5 to 10 hours. Again, if you're not dealing with a design professional or a design firm that does not have the skills or the experience to understand and conduct research, then you may be missing out on a critical step. Also, if you're paying peanuts to your designer, it is unreasonable to expect them to do any research at all because they do not know the challenges your business faces and are not interested in providing with a design solution to those challenges. They're not being paid to in any case. And even if they were, they would not have the skills to conduct meaningful research. Step 3, brainstorming and sketching. Once you're armed with a diagnosis and relevant research into clients' business, their market segments and their competition, it is time to put it all together into a cohesive solution strategy. This involves excessive mind mapping and sketching and doodling. Brainstorming involves mapping words and ideas that emerge from the diagnosis and research into branches of possible solutions. These words and ideas are then quickly translated into rough sketches. These take inspiration from mood boards built during the research phase. Sketches are done as thumbnails where each sketch may be further expanded with sub-sketches. This happens in a series of sessions on paper using a pencil, and this is where all the magic happens. If you're working with a bigger design firm, then this activity may be undertaken by a team of designers led by a creative director. Typically, this stage can take anywhere from 5 to 25 hours. When dealing with fly-by-night designers or crowdsourcing websites where designers are scrambling to compete on as many projects as they can in the hopes of landing a paid project, it is impossible to expect them to fully engage the brainstorming and sketching process since it takes time and requires the previous 2 steps to have been done. I do not say that all such designers would jump into a design software. There may be a few who do go through this painstaking process. Step 4, creating digital designs. After a few intense sketching sessions, a design professional would be ready to start translating some of the sketches into digital designs on the computer. Usually, this process involves picking a short list of promising sketches that meet the creative standards of the designer and then scanning them into the computer. Once the sketches are scanned, they're imported into a vector editing software such as Adobe Illustrator, and then begins the long and tedious process of building the vector artwork of the logo design. Most designers worth their salt would be good at this step, since this involves working with the software and not much creativity is involved in the strictest sense. Typically, this stage can take anywhere from 5 to 25 hours. Based on how many different design directions you've been promised or the client has been promised, this step can be sped up. If the designer has been working for a considerable period with their software, it can become a very efficient process. Step 5, presenting to the client. Logo design directions that have been created in the software need to be presented to the client, and they need to be presented with a real-world context, not just on a blank piece of paper or on a blank white background. The client needs to be able to look at each design and see how they would look and feel and behave in the real world. In fact, we do not see any brand's logo without any context in the real world. The logos are on print materials, signs, apparels, and so on. Creating real-world simulation, mock-ups, and scenarios can be time-taking, but this is a very important step. It's for the benefit of the client. And the personality of the brand, this has to be shown via different contextual examples. Typically with bigger design firms, the design concepts are presented in person or via Skype by the creative director, who talks the client through design ideas, the insights, the messages, and all that. Typically, the stage can take anywhere from 5 to 15 hours. Step 6, tweaking and revising. Presumably, after the step, the client proceeds to select one of the design directions and may engage in asking for tweaks or revisions. This may include reviewing color combos or perhaps even font options, but they should be minor. If the designer or the design firm, the team, has done their job, the revisions should not be large or drawn out. If the project moves into the 7th or 8th revision round, then the project be considered a failure, at least from a design professional point of view. Either that, or the designer is dealing with a client who wants to control the design process and turn it into their personal preference statement. Both these cases are detrimental to the client themselves. It would also end up frustrating a true design professional. Typically, this design stage would take 3 to 12 hours. Step 7, final step. Once the revision process is completed, it is time to create a final brand asset for delivery to the client. This would include creating print-ready industry standard file formats such as EPS, AI, vector files, JPEG, PNG, GIF, web files, and other miscellaneous files such as PDF, TIFF, PSD, and so on. Often, a brand usage manual style guide may also be included. This manual lays down the details of the logo design, the usage, the do's and don'ts, as well as other information. All these files are usually bundled up and put up on the design company's web servers so that the client can easily download them. Such brand assets are usually held on file for a period of 90 days after the close of the project, but there are some agencies which hold them for maybe the lifetime of the firm. Typically, this stage can take anywhere from 3 hours to 17 hours. By now, I believe you would have a good idea of what actually goes into creating a great logo, or any decent logo for that matter, and the amount of skill and the time and that is expended. The real cost of a logo design that meets all the criteria that we set out at the beginning of this video is hence priceless. A logo design can have a tremendously positive impact on your business, or it could have a negative impact. This is where the opportunity cost comes up. One cannot be really sure of their logo doing its job if there is an opportunity cost, because it is intangible. It is easy to assess if a logo is pretty or ugly, but it is hard to understand if it is communicating the right message to the target audience. Is it connecting with the potential customers? Is the logo creating the right impact? Is it appropriately creating the right platform on which to build the business? So when someone asks me the cost of a logo design, I say that the cost of a logo does not matter. You can have one for as little as $50 or $50,000. But the real cost of a logo design is the impact it has on your business, both positive and negative. And that is why no one should take their logo design lightly. It should not be treated as a mere piece of graphic, a commodity. I hope you've enjoyed this video today. If you have any questions, please hit me up on Twitter or leave a comment below. Till the next video, take care.